She fed the hungry boy, not knowing that one day he would return as Mafia boss. That single act of kindness, a warm plate of food, offered through the back door of a small diner in Brooklyn, would echo through 2 decades and return to reshape everything she believed about fate, about love, about the invisible threads that bind strangers across time. Margaret Sullivan stands at the window of her empty diner, watching the rain fall over Atlantic Avenue. The neon sign outside flickers, casting intermittent red light across her tired face. She is 53 years old, and tonight, for the first time in 30 years, she does not know if she will be able to keep the doors open tomorrow. The eviction notice sits on the counter behind her, its stark legal language a death sentence for the only life she has ever known. The diner is called Rosie's, named after her mother, who opened it in 1962, with nothing but determination and a recipe for meatloaf that could make grown men weep. Margaret inherited it when she was 25, along with a mountain of debt and a promise to never let it close. For 28 years, she has kept that promise. Through recessions, through the changing neighborhood, through the slow death of small businesses across the city. But now, standing in the amber glow of the kitchen lights, she feels that promise slipping through her fingers like sand. The rain intensifies. Thunder rolls across the Brooklyn skyline, shaking the windows in their frames. Margaret presses her palm against the cold glass and closes her eyes, remembering. 20 years ago, on a night just like this one, a boy appeared at her back door. She was younger then, still wearing her hair long, still believing that hard work alone could solve any problem. It was past midnight and she was cleaning the grill when she heard the knocking, soft at first, then more insistent. When she opened the door, she found him standing in the alley, soaked to the bone, shivering so hard his teeth chattered. He could not have been more than 12 years old, dark hair plastered to his forehead, eyes the color of storm clouds, cheekbones sharp beneath skin that had not seen enough meals. He did not speak. He did not ask for anything. He simply stood there looking at her with an expression that broke something inside her chest. Margaret did not ask questions. She did not call the police or social services. She simply stepped aside and let him in. She wrapped him in a clean towel from the supply closet and sat him at the counter. She made him a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, poured him a glass of milk, and watched him eat as if he had not seen food in days. Perhaps he had not. She never asked. When he finished, he looked up at her with those grey eyes and said 2 words. "Thank you." His voice was deeper than she expected, already carrying the weight of experiences no child should know. She wanted to ask him everything. Where he came from, where his parents were, how he ended up in an alley behind a Brooklyn diner in the middle of a storm. But something in his gaze told her that questions would only push him away. So instead, she made him another plate. He came back the next night, and the night after that. For 3 months he appeared at her back door after closing time, and Margaret fed him without questions. She learned small things about him in fragments. His name was Daniel. He had no family that he would speak of. He was surviving on the streets, but he was smart, so smart, reading newspapers left behind by customers and asking her about words he did not understand. Then, one night, he did not come. Margaret waited by the back door until 2 in the morning, but the alley remained empty. She waited the next night and the next. A week passed, then a month. Daniel never returned. She searched for him, asked around the neighborhood, but no one knew anything about a homeless boy with grey eyes. He had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving nothing behind but the memory of a child who ate like he was starving and said thank you like he meant it with his entire soul. Over the years, Margaret thought of him often. She wondered if he had found a home, if he had survived, if he remembered the woman who fed him meatloaf on rainy nights. She never received an answer. Daniel became a ghost in her memory, a reminder of all the people who passed through her diner and disappeared into the vastness of the city. Now, 20 years later, standing in that same diner with an eviction notice on the counter, Margaret feels the full weight of time pressing down on her shoulders. The neighborhood has changed. The old families have moved away, replaced by developers and corporations with no interest in a 50-year-old diner that smells like coffee and history. The landlord wants to sell the building, and Margaret cannot afford the new asking price, not even close. She has tried everything. Bank loans, denied because her credit is too fragile. Small business grants that went to flashier applicants with better connections. Crowdfunding campaigns that raised a few $1,000s, but nowhere near enough. She even considered selling her apartment, the tiny one-bedroom above the diner where she has lived for 3 decades, but even that would not be enough to cover what she owes. The rain continues to fall. Margaret turns away from the window and walks through the empty diner, running her fingers along the counter where generations of customers have sat. The red vinyl stools are cracked now, the chrome faded, but she sees them as they were in their glory days. She sees her mother standing behind the register, laughing with the regulars. She sees herself as a young woman full of hope, believing that this place would stand forever. Tomorrow, the lawyers will come. Tomorrow, she will have to sign papers that will end everything her family built. Tomorrow, Rosie's diner will become another casualty of progress, another empty storefront waiting to be transformed into something shiny and soulless. Margaret sits down at the counter and buries her face in her hands. For the first time in years, she allows herself to cry. She does not hear the car pull up outside. She does not hear the footsteps approaching the door. She does not hear anything until the bell above the entrance chimes, and a voice she does not recognize speaks from behind her. "The diner is closed," she says, without looking up. "We open at 6. The voice that responds is deep, measured, carrying an authority that makes her spine straighten instinctively. "I know," the voice says. "I am not here for the meatloaf." Margaret turns around slowly. A man stands in the doorway, rain dripping from his expensive coat onto the worn linoleum. He is tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looks like he belongs in a boardroom or a courtroom, not in a struggling diner in Brooklyn at midnight. But there is something in those eyes, something familiar, something that makes Margaret's breath catch in her throat. The man takes a step forward, and the light catches his face fully. The sharp cheekbones, the strong jaw, the way he holds himself like someone who has learned to survive in a world that wanted him dead. "You fed me," he says quietly. 20 years ago, you fed a hungry boy who knocked on your back door. You never asked questions. You never judged. You just gave me a plate of food and a reason to believe that not everyone in this world is cruel." Margaret stares at him, her mind struggling to reconcile the memory of a shivering 12-year-old with the powerful man standing before her. "Daniel," she whispers. He nods once, a ghost of a smile crossing his features. "I told you I would pay you back someday. I am sorry it took so long." Margaret shakes her head, still trying to process what is happening. "You do not owe me anything," she says. "It was just food. Anyone would have done the same." Daniel's expression shifts, something dark passing through his eyes. "No," he says firmly, "they would not have. I knocked on 17 doors that night before I reached yours. 17 people told me to go away, called me names, threatened to call the police. You were the only one who let me in." He reaches into his coat and pulls out an envelope, placing it on the counter between them. Margaret looks at it, but does not touch it. "What is this?" Daniel meets her gaze directly. "The deed to this building, paid in full. The diner is yours. No landlord, no eviction. No one will ever threaten to take it from you again." Margaret's legs give out beneath her. She grabs the counter for support, staring at the envelope as if it might bite her. "I cannot accept this," she breathes. "This must have cost a fortune. How could you possibly afford to do this?" Daniel is silent for a moment. When he speaks, his voice is careful, measured. "I have done well for myself," he says. "Very well. I built something from nothing, the way you taught me was possible. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered the woman who fed a stranger's child without asking for anything in return. You saved my life, Margaret. Let me save your diner." Tears stream down Margaret's face, but she is laughing now, a sound halfway between joy and disbelief. "The boy I fed became successful," she says, wonderingly. You made something of yourself. Daniel's smile does not quite reach his eyes. I made something, he agrees. Whether it is good or bad depends on who you ask. Before Margaret can respond, car doors slam outside. 3 men in dark suits enter the diner, their eyes scanning the room with professional efficiency. They position themselves near the exits, and Margaret feels a chill run down her spine that has nothing to do with the rain. Daniel sees her expression and speaks quickly. They are with me. Protection. In my line of work, you make enemies. I wanted to make sure. Our reunion was not interrupted. Margaret looks at the men, at their earpieces and bulging jackets, at the way they hold themselves like soldiers awaiting orders. She looks back at Daniel, at the boy she once fed, and sees the truth written in the lines of his face. What exactly is your line of work? She asks quietly. Daniel does not answer immediately. He walks to the window and looks out at the rain-soaked street, his reflection ghostly in the glass. I run an organization, he says finally. Import and export, real estate, investments. Some of it is legitimate. Some of it operates in grey areas. I am not going to lie to you, Margaret. I have done things that would make you ashamed you ever helped me. But everything I built because a woman in a Brooklyn diner showed me that kindness still exists, that a single act of compassion can change someone's entire trajectory. He turns back to face her. I am not asking you to approve of who I became. I am only asking you to accept what I am offering. This diner meant everything to me during the worst time of my life. Let me make sure it survives. Margaret sits in silence, processing everything she has heard. The Daniel she remembered was a hungry child, desperate and alone. The Daniel standing before her is something else entirely, a man of power and danger, surrounded by guards, capable of buying buildings on a whim. The distance between those two versions of him seems impossible to bridge. But when she looks into his eyes, she still sees the boy who said thank you, like he meant it with his entire soul. She picks up the envelope and holds it against her chest. Why now? She asks. After 20 years, why come back now? Daniel's expression softens. Because I heard you were in trouble. I have people who keep track of things for me. When your name came across my desk attached to an eviction notice, I knew I could not let it happen. Not to you. Never to you. He pulls out a business card and places it on the counter. If you ever need anything at all, you call this number. Day or night, someone will answer. You will never be alone again, Margaret. That is my promise to you. Margaret looks at the card, at the simple black print on white paper. No company name, no title, just a phone number. She looks back up at Daniel, and despite everything, despite the guards and the implications and the weight of 20 years, she smiles. You grew up, she says softly. I survived, he corrects. Because of you. The rain begins to ease outside, the storm passing over Brooklyn toward the sea. Daniel buttons his coat and moves toward the door, his men falling into formation behind him. Wait, Margaret calls out. Will I see you again? Daniel pauses with his hand on the door. Yes, he says. I am not disappearing this time. We have a lot of catching up to do. Then he is gone, swallowed by the night and the rain, leaving Margaret alone in her diner with a deed in her hands and 1,000 questions spinning through her mind. She sits at the counter for a long time, listening to the drip of water from the awning outside, feeling the weight of her future settle around her shoulders like a coat. For 30 years, she has fought to keep this place alive. Now, in a single night, everything has changed. She does not know what Daniel has become. She does not know what darkness lurks in the empire he has built. But she knows one thing with absolute certainty. The hungry boy she fed 20 years ago remembered her, and he came back. That has to mean something. That has to matter. Margaret folds the deed carefully and places it in the pocket of her apron, next to her heart. Tomorrow, she will have questions. Tomorrow, she will have to decide what kind of relationship she wants with the man Daniel has become. But tonight, for the first time in months, she feels something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. This story is just beginning, and the connection between Margaret and Daniel will take turns you cannot imagine. Subscribe now so you do not miss a single moment of what happens next. 3 weeks pass, and Margaret learns that accepting Daniel's gift is only the beginning. The deed to the building is legitimate, verified by 3 different lawyers she hired specifically to look for problems. There are none. Daniel transferred ownership cleanly, professionally, leaving no strings attached and no debt to be repaid. On paper, it is a simple act of generosity from a successful businessman to a woman who once helped him. But Margaret knows better than to believe anything involving Daniel is simple. The first sign comes in the form of repairs. One morning, she arrives at the diner to find a construction crew outside, replacing the ancient awning with a new one. The foreman tells her it has been paid for in advance, no invoice required. 2 days later, a refrigeration company shows up to install new equipment, top of the line, efficient and silent. The electrician comes next, then the plumber, each one mentioning that their services have been prepaid by an anonymous benefactor. Margaret does not need to ask who is responsible. She calls the number on Daniel's card for the first time, and he answers on the second ring. "You are fixing my diner," she says without preamble. "I am improving my investment," he replies, and she can hear the smile in his voice. "The building is valuable. It should be maintained properly. This is too much. The deed was already too much. You cannot keep spending money on me. I can spend my money however I choose, and I choose to make sure you never have to worry about a broken freezer or a leaking pipe again." Is that so terrible? Margaret sighs, leaning against the counter that now gleams from a professional cleaning service she definitely did not hire. "I do not understand," she admits. "We barely knew each other. 3 months, 20 years ago. Why are you doing all of this?" Daniel is quiet for a moment. "Because those 3 months saved my life," he says finally. "You do not know what I was running from. You do not know what I would have become if you had turned me away like everyone else. You gave me food, yes, but you also gave me something more important. You gave me evidence that goodness exists, that someone could help a stranger without wanting anything in return. That belief carried me through things you cannot imagine." His voice drops lower. "I owe you a debt that money cannot repay, but I can try. Let me try." Margaret feels tears threatening again, the same overwhelming emotion that has ambushed her repeatedly since that night 3 weeks ago. "Okay," she whispers. "Okay, good. Now, I would like to take you to dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere nice. Somewhere we can talk without interruption. Will you come?" Margaret hesitates. Dinner with a man who surrounds himself with armed guards. Dinner with whatever Daniel has become. As friends, she clarifies. "Old friends catching up. Of course, I will send a car at 7. I can drive myself, I know you can. But humor me. I worry about safety." Something in his tone makes her shiver. Worry about safety. What kind of world does he live in where safety is a constant concern? Fine, she agrees. 7 o'clock. The restaurant Daniel chooses is in Manhattan, a place Margaret has only ever seen in magazines. The kind of establishment where the menu has no prices and the sommelier speaks in hushed, reverent tones about vintages and terroir. She feels completely out of place in her best dress, a simple blue number she bought for her niece's wedding 5 years ago. But Daniel looks at her like she belongs there, like she belongs anywhere she chooses to be. He is waiting when she arrives, rising from a corner table that offers privacy and a clear view of all exits. Old habits, Margaret thinks, survival instincts that never fade. They order, and the conversation begins carefully. Surface. Topics first. The weather, the changes in Brooklyn, the customers she remembers from 2 decades ago. But eventually, inevitably, the questions Margaret has been holding back begin to spill out. "Tell me what happened to you," she says, "after you stopped coming to the diner. Where did you go?" Daniel swirls the wine in his glass, watching the light play through the deep red liquid. "I was found," he says, "by men who recognized potential in a homeless child. They took me in, gave me structure, education, purpose. They also gave me a code to live by, rules that governed everything." "What kind of rules?" Loyalty above all else. Family means everything. Never betray your own. Never show weakness to enemies. That sounds like something I have heard before, Margaret says carefully. In movies, about certain kinds of organizations. Daniel meets her gaze directly. Then you already understand what I am telling you. The confirmation settles between them like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward, changing everything. You are involved with organized activity, Margaret says, keeping her voice low. I run it, Daniel corrects. For the Eastern Seaboard, I am the one who makes decisions, who gives orders, who takes responsibility when things go wrong. Margaret sets down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. The boy I fed grew up to be a crime figure. The boy you fed grew up to be a survivor. The organization gave me power, resources, the ability to protect people who need protecting. Yes, we operate outside the law. Yes, we do things that polite society finds distasteful. But we also provide services that no one else will. We solve problems that the police cannot or will not touch. We take care of our communities in ways that governments have abandoned. That sounds like justification for terrible things. Maybe it is. Daniel shrugs, unapologetic. I am not asking you to approve. I told you that from the beginning. I am only asking you to see me clearly. To know who I became and why, and decide for yourself if you want me in your life. Margaret sits with this information, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle piece that does not quite fit. The repairs to my diner, she says slowly. The deed to the building. Is any of that connected to illegal activity? No, that money is clean. Real estate investments, legitimate businesses I have acquired over the years. Whatever you think of me, I would never taint what I gave you. Never. She believes him. Against all logic, against everything she thought she knew about right and wrong, she believes him. Why did you disappear back then? She asks. 20 years ago. Why did you stop coming? Daniel's expression darkens. Because my presence was putting you in danger. The men who found me, who recruited me, they had enemies. Those enemies were looking for leverage, for weakness. I realized that if they discovered I cared about a diner owner in Brooklyn, they would use you against me. So I left. I made sure no one knew about you. I buried that part of my life so deep that even my closest associates never learned about the woman who fed me when I was starving. You protected me by disappearing. I protected you the only way I knew how. But I never forgot you. Every year on the anniversary of the night we met, I would drive past the diner just to see the lights on. Just to know you were still there. It was the only connection to my past that I allowed myself to keep. Margaret feels something shift. Inside her, the fear and judgment she has been carrying begin to soften, replaced by something more complicated. Compassion, maybe. Understanding. You were just a child, she says quietly. You did not choose this life. It chose you. Does that make a difference? I think it does. I think the choices we make after our circumstances trap us matter more than the traps themselves. Daniel studies her face, searching for something. You are not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are. Even people who have known me for years. They fear what I can do, the power I hold. But you look at me the same way you did 20 years ago, like I am still that hungry kid who just needs someone to believe in him. Margaret reaches across the table and places her hand over his. The gesture is simple, maternal, but Daniel flinches, as if she has touched an open wound. You are still that kid, she says. Somewhere inside, under all the armor you have built, you are still the boy who said thank you, like he meant it, with his whole heart. That is the Daniel I see. That is the Daniel I fed. Something glistens in Daniel's eyes. He looks away quickly, composing himself, but not before Margaret sees the crack in his carefully constructed facade. I have done terrible things, he whispers. I know. You should hate me. I do not. Why? Because hate is easy. Understanding is hard. And you deserve someone who is willing to do the hard work of seeing you completely, not just the parts that are convenient. Daniel is silent, for a long moment. When he speaks again, his voice is rough. I do not deserve your kindness. That is not for you to decide. That is for me to give freely. And I give it, Daniel. I gave it 20 years ago, and I give it now. Whatever you have become, whatever you have done, you are still the child I fed on rainy nights. That connection does not disappear just because life got complicated. They finish dinner in a different kind of silence, comfortable rather than tense. Daniel orders coffee. Margaret orders tea, and they sit together as the restaurant empties around them. Before they leave, Daniel makes a request. I would like to see you again, not just for business updates or diner repairs. I would like to know you, the person you are now, not just the memory I have carried for 2 decades. Would that be acceptable? Margaret smiles. I would like that too. Good. Then I will arrange something. Something simple, no guards, no business. Just 2 old friends spending time together. Can you do that? Go somewhere without protection? For you, I will find a way. The car takes Margaret back to Brooklyn, and she watches the city lights pass by in a blur. Her mind is churning with everything she has learned, everything she has felt. The Daniel she remembers and the Daniel who exists now are the same person, separated by 20 years and a universe of experience. Reconciling those 2 versions will take time. But Margaret has time. For the first time in months, she has a future. Stretching out before her, the diner saved, the building secure, the weight of imminent loss lifted from her shoulders. And she has a friend, a complicated, dangerous, surprisingly vulnerable friend who looks at her like she hung the moon simply by feeding him meatloaf when he was hungry. Life has taken a strange turn. Margaret decides to see where it leads. The months that follow reshape Margaret's life in ways she never anticipated. Daniel keeps his promise, appearing at the diner every few weeks for coffee and conversation. He comes alone when he can, though Margaret notices the dark car that always parks across the street, the shadows of men watching from a distance, protection that he cannot fully abandon, even for her. They talk about everything. His childhood before the streets, the parents who abandoned him, the foster homes that failed him, her marriage that ended in divorce, the children she never had, the mother who taught her that food is love made visible. They argue about politics and laugh about memories and sit in comfortable silence when words feel unnecessary. Margaret learns to read the subtle shifts in Daniel's demeanor, the tension in his shoulders when business is difficult, the darkness in his eyes when memories surface that he cannot share, the rare, genuine smile that transforms his face into something almost boyish, a glimpse of the child who still lives somewhere inside him. For his part, Daniel learns Margaret's rhythms, the way she hums old songs while cooking, the stubbornness that makes her refuse help even when she needs it, the fierce protectiveness she extends to every regular customer who walks through her door, treating them like family simply because they chose to eat at her establishment. The diner thrives under its new stability. Without the constant anxiety about rent and repairs, Margaret can focus on what she does best, feeding people. She hires help for the first time in years, a young woman named Eleanor who reminds her of herself at that age, ambitious and hard-working and convinced that effort alone can solve any problem. She expands the menu cautiously, adding dishes her mother would have approved of, comfort food that draws new customers from across the neighborhood. Daniel never asks for anything in return for his help. He pays for his coffee like any other customer, leaves generous tips that Margaret quietly adds to Elena's wages, and treats the diner like sacred ground that must be approached with reverence. The other regulars learn to accept his presence without understanding it, this well-dressed stranger who sits at the counter and watches Margaret cook with an expression approaching worship. One evening, in late autumn, Daniel arrives at the diner looking more troubled than Margaret has ever seen him. His jaw is tight, his movements clipped, and when he sits at his usual spot, he does not order anything. He simply stares at the counter, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles turn white. Margaret finishes with her last customer, locks the front door and sits down beside him. "Tell me," she says simply. Daniel does not look at her. "There is a problem with my organization. Internal conflict. Someone I trusted has been working against me. feeding information to competitors, putting people I care about in danger. Tonight, I have to make a decision that will affect dozens of lives, possibly more. What kind of decision? The kind that cannot be taken back, the kind that will either solidify my position or destroy everything I have built. Margaret is quiet for a moment. What does your gut tell you to do? My gut tells me to respond with force, to show strength, to eliminate the threat completely and send a message that betrayal has consequences. And your heart? Daniel finally looks at her, and the conflict in his eyes is painful to witness. My heart tells me there might be another way, a path that does not require violence, a solution that preserves something instead of destroying it. Then why is this difficult? Because the path my heart suggests is risky. It requires trust in people who have given me no reason to trust them. It requires showing restraint when everyone around me is demanding decisive action. If I am wrong, if I misread the situation, more people will suffer than if I simply follow the traditional response. Margaret considers this carefully. Can I tell you something my mother used to say? Please. She used to say that anyone can destroy. Destruction is easy. It takes no skill, no courage, no imagination. But creation, preservation, mercy, those require strength that most people do not possess. The truly powerful are not those who can tear down the most. They are the ones who choose to build when tearing down would be simpler. Daniel absorbs this in silence. You think I should take the merciful path. I think you should take whatever path allows you to look at yourself in the mirror tomorrow. Not the path others expect. Not the path that is traditional. The path that aligns with who you want to be, not who you have been forced to become, even if it fails, especially if it fails. Because at least then you will have failed trying to be better. And that failure will teach you more than a successful act of destruction ever could. Daniel stands abruptly and walks to the window. The rain has started again, streaking the glass in patterns that blur the streetlights beyond. You make it sound simple, he says. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. The difference between right and wrong usually is. He turns back to her and there is something new in his expression. Resolution. I have to go. But I need you to know that this conversation may have just saved lives. Many lives. Margaret rises and crosses to him, placing her hand on his arm. Whatever happens tonight, come back and tell me about it. Promise me. I promise. He leaves without another word, disappearing into the rain and the waiting car. Margaret watches the taillights fade into the distance and sends up a silent prayer to whoever might be listening. A prayer for Daniel. A prayer for the people whose lives hang on his decision. A prayer for the mercy she hopes he will choose. She does not know what he will decide, but she has done what she can. She has planted a seed. The rest is up to him. If you are watching this right now, take a moment to leave a comment with the phrase, "Kindness changes everything." This story is proof that a single act of compassion can ripple across decades. Comment those words to show that you believe in the power of simple goodness. Your comment might be the encouragement someone else needs to hear today. Daniel returns 3 days later, and the change in him is visible immediately. The tension that has lived in his shoulders for months has eased. His eyes are clearer, his movements more relaxed. He sits at the counter and orders coffee, and when Margaret brings it, he catches her hand gently. "I chose mercy," he says quietly. "It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every instinct screamed at me to respond with force, to follow the path that has always worked before. But I kept hearing your mother's words. Anyone can destroy. The truly powerful are those who choose to build." What happened? I negotiated. I gave the person who betrayed me a chance to explain, to make amends. It turned out there were circumstances I did not understand, pressure being applied from outside that I had not seen. We reached an agreement that preserved relationships and strengthened the organization in ways that violence never could have achieved. And the threat? Neutralized. Not through elimination, but through reconciliation. The person who was my enemy is now one of my strongest allies, bound by gratitude and shared purpose rather than fear. Margaret squeezes his hand before releasing it. I am proud of you. Daniel's laugh is surprised, almost disbelieving. Proud? I run a criminal organization. I have done things that would horrify you. And you are proud of me? I am proud that you chose to be better when it would have been easier to be worse. I am proud that you listened to your heart instead of your fear. I am proud of the man you are becoming, Daniel, not the man you have been forced to be. Something shifts in Daniel's expression. The walls he has constructed so carefully over the years seem to tremble, just slightly. For a moment, he looks exactly like the hungry boy who appeared at her back, door seeking kindness in a world that had shown him none. No one has ever said that to me before, he admits. Proud. My associates respect me. My enemies fear me. But proud, that is something different. Then I will keep saying it until you believe it. I am proud of you, Daniel. Every time you choose compassion over cruelty, every time you build instead of destroy, I will be proud of you. That is what family does. The word hangs in the air between them. Family. Daniel's eyes shine. Is that what we are? Margaret smiles. That is what we have been since the night I fed you meatloaf in a thunderstorm. Family is not just about blood. It is about the people who see you at your worst and still believe you can be your best. I saw you at your worst, Daniel. A hungry, scared, abandoned child. And I believed in you then. I believe in you now. That makes us family, whether we share blood or not. Daniel is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is thick. I have never had a family. Not really. The organization calls itself that, but it is different. Transactional, conditional. What you are offering, what you have always offered, is something I do not know how to accept. Then let me teach you. One meatloaf dinner at a time. For the first time since she has known him as an adult, Daniel laughs. A real laugh, free and full and utterly lacking in guardedness. The sound fills the empty diner like music. One meatloaf dinner at a time, he agrees. I think I can handle that. The autumn deepens into winter, and the relationship between Margaret and Daniel settles into something comfortable and sustaining. He becomes a fixture at the diner, known to the regulars as Margaret's nephew, who works in business and always pays for everyone's coffee. No one asks questions about the expensive suits or the mysterious drivers who wait for him outside. In Brooklyn, people know better than to pry. Margaret watches Daniel transform slowly over the months. The ruthless efficiency that defines his public persona softens when he is with her. He laughs more, shares more, allows himself to be vulnerable in ways he cannot afford in his other life. She becomes his sanctuary, the one place where he does not have to be in control, where he can simply be Daniel, the boy who was hungry and afraid and found kindness when he needed it most. For her part, Margaret discovers a purpose she did not know she was missing. Feeding a child who had no one taught her something about the power of simple generosity. Watching that child grow into a man who still carries her kindness in his heart shows her that what we give away never truly leaves us. It multiplies. It transforms. It comes back in ways we cannot predict. The winter brings challenges. A rival organization tests Daniel's territory, probing for weaknesses. Margaret does not know the details, but she sees the strain it puts on him, the late nights, the worried phone calls taken in quiet corners. She feeds him, listens to what he can share, and reminds him of the principles they have discussed together. Mercy when possible, strength when necessary. Always the path that allows him to live with himself afterward. By spring, the challenge has been resolved. Daniel's organization emerges stronger, its reputation for fair dealing enhanced rather than diminished. Word spreads through certain circles that Daniel is a different kind of leader, one who prefers negotiation to violence, who rewards loyalty and gives second chances when they are earned. It attracts a different caliber of people to his operation, people who are tired of the old ways, who want to build something that might actually last. Margaret knows she cannot take credit for all of this. Daniel's transformation is his own work, his own choices, his own determination to be better than his circumstances demanded. But she also knows that she planted seeds in fertile ground, and watching them grow fills her with a pride that transcends anything she has felt before. She never had children of her own, but she has Daniel, and that, she thinks, is enough. The summer heat arrives early, blanketing Brooklyn in a thick humidity that makes even breathing feel like effort. Margaret keeps the diner cool with the industrial air conditioning Daniel insisted on installing, and business thrives as people seek refuge from the oppressive warmth. The neighborhood has accepted the diner's revival as a small miracle, a sign that some things can survive against all odds. But miracles, Margaret learns, attract attention. The first sign of trouble comes in the form of a visitor. A man appears at the diner one afternoon, well-dressed like Daniel but lacking his quiet authority. This man has sharp features and calculating eyes that take in every detail of the establishment with obvious assessment. He sits at the counter and orders nothing, simply watching Margaret work with an intensity that makes her skin prickle. "Can I help you?" she asks finally, her voice carefully neutral. The man smiles, but it does not reach his eyes. "I am a friend of Daniel's," he says. "We work together. He has told me so much about this place. I wanted to see it for myself." "That is kind of you. Coffee is on the house for friends of Daniel." She pours him a cup and he accepts it without drinking. "This is a nice location," he continues. "Very valuable real estate. The building must be worth quite a bit." "I would not know. I just make the food." The man's smile widens. "Of course. My name is Victor, by the way. I'm sure we will be seeing more of each other." He leaves money on the counter despite Margaret's offer of free coffee and exits without touching his drink. Margaret watches him go, a cold knot forming in her stomach. There was something predatory about that man, something that reminded her of the world Daniel inhabits and the dangers that lurk within it. She calls Daniel that evening and describes the encounter. His response is immediate and intense. "Do not engage." "With him," Daniel says, his voice hard. "If he comes back, be polite but give him nothing. No information, no opinions, no reaction. Victor is testing you and by extension testing me. Who is he? A colleague, one who has never been comfortable with my leadership. He looks for weaknesses constantly, leverage to use if the opportunity arises. The fact that he knows about you is concerning. I thought you said no one knew about our connection. Someone must have talked. I will find out who. Should I be worried?" A pause. "Not yet, but I am going to increase security around the diner. You will not see them, but they will be there. Trust me, Margaret, I will not let anything happen to you." True to his word, nothing obvious changes, but Margaret notices small things. A new delivery driver who seems to spend a lot of time parked on the street. A customer who comes every morning and sits facing the door, reading newspapers for hours. The sense of being watched, but watched over rather than watched against. Victor returns a week later, this time with questions. "I hear you have known Daniel for many years," he says, "stirring sugar into coffee he will not drink. Since he was a child, is that right?" "We are old friends," Margaret replies carefully. "It must be interesting to see how much he has changed, from a nobody to the head of one of the most powerful organizations on the East Coast. Quite a transformation. He worked hard for what he has. Did he?" Victor's smile turns sharp. "Or did he get lucky? Find the right people to protect him when he was vulnerable? Sometimes I wonder if Daniel truly earned his position, or if he simply outlived everyone who stood in his way. I would not know anything about that. Of course not. You are just a diner owner. What could you possibly understand about power and ambition and the price of survival?" He leaves money on the counter again and walks out without looking back. Margaret's hands shake as she clears his untouched cup. That night, Daniel appears at closing time with a tension in his posture that Margaret has learned to recognize. "Victor is making a move," he says without preamble. "He has been building support among the other families, positioning himself as an alternative to my leadership. The argument he is making is that I have grown soft, too interested in legitimacy and mercy, that our organization needs someone willing to use traditional methods. And visiting me is part of this? You are his evidence. The fact that I have ties to someone outside the organization, someone normal, someone who represents everything we are supposed to be above." He is using our relationship to argue that my priorities are misplaced. Margaret feels something harden inside her. Then maybe you should distance yourself from me. If I am putting you at risk, I will understand. Absolutely not. Daniel's voice is fierce. You are not the weakness he thinks you are. You are the best part of me, the only part that remembers what it means to be human. I will not sacrifice that for political convenience. Then what will you do? I will do what I have done for 20 years. I will survive. I will outmaneuver him. I will prove that my way is not weakness, but strength of a different kind. And if you cannot? Daniel meets her gaze directly. Then I will burn everything before I let him hurt you. That is a promise. The tension builds over the following weeks. Margaret hears fragments from Daniel's occasional visits, references to meetings gone wrong, alliances shifting, the delicate balance of power tilting in dangerous directions. She watches him grow leaner, sharper, more consumed by the battle he is fighting on multiple fronts. She feeds him when he comes. She listens when he needs to talk. She reminds him of his principles when the pressure tempts him to abandon them. It is all she can do, and she hopes it is enough. One night, Daniel arrives at the diner well past midnight, his face pale in the fluorescent lighting. Victor made an attempt, he says without preamble, tonight. During a meeting that was supposed to be routine, he had men positioned, weapons ready. It should have been the end of me. Margaret's heart stops. But you are here. I am here. Daniel's smile is grim, because the people Victor thought were his allies decided they were mine instead. The mercy I have shown over the years, the second chances, the willingness to negotiate instead of destroy. It paid off tonight. When Victor gave the signal, no one moved. He was alone, surrounded by men who had chosen to protect me rather than join his betrayal. What happened to him? He is being held. There will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Daniel is quiet for a long moment. That is what I came to talk to you about. The traditional response would be severe, final, a message to anyone else who might consider betrayal. But I keep hearing your voice in my head, telling me that anyone can destroy, telling me that the truly powerful are those who choose to build. Margaret sits down heavily, the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. I cannot make this decision for you, she says. This is your world, your rules. Whatever choice you make, you have to live with it. I know. But I need to know that you will not hate me. Whatever I decide, I need to know that you will still see the hungry boy when you look at me. That is the only thing keeping me human right now. Margaret reaches out and takes his hands in hers. I saw the hungry boy the day. You walked into this diner wearing designer suits and carrying the weight of an empire. I see him now. Nothing you do will change that, Daniel. Nothing. He closes his eyes, and for a moment he looks impossibly young. Then I will choose mercy, he whispers. Victor will be exiled, stripped of rank and resources, but alive. His family will not be touched. The cycle of revenge will end with me. Are you sure? Margaret asks gently. No, but I am sure that I want to be the kind of man who tries to break the cycle, even if it costs me, even if the world calls me weak. That is who I want to be. Then that is who you are, and I am proud of you. The crisis passes. Victor disappears from Daniel's world, exiled to some distant city where his ambitions can no longer cause harm. The organization stabilizes under Daniel's continued leadership, and the message spreads through certain circles that Daniel is a leader who values loyalty and rewards it with mercy. More people seek his protection. More businesses align with his interests. His power grows not through fear but through respect. Margaret watches from the sidelines, feeding her regulars, listening to their ordinary problems, providing the same simple kindness that changed Daniel's life 20 years ago. She knows that her role in his world is small, a single point of light in an ocean of darkness. But small lights matter. They guide people home when everything else is shadow. Daniel visits more often now that the threat has passed. He brings gifts sometimes, things she does not need but accepts because refusing would hurt his feelings. A new mixer for the kitchen, a first edition of her favorite cookbook, flowers on the anniversary of her mother's death. He is learning, she realizes, learning how to express love in ways that do not involve power or protection or grand gestures of financial generosity, learning the small currencies of affection that ordinary people exchange without thinking. One evening, he arrives at closing time and sits at the counter with an expression she cannot read. "I have been thinking," he says, "about legacy, about what I want to leave behind when my time in leadership ends." Margaret raises an eyebrow. "Are you planning to retire?" "Eventually. Not soon, but eventually. When I do, I want to make sure that everything I built continues in a direction I can be proud of. That means changing things now, while I still have the power to shape outcomes." What kind of changes? Moving more, operations toward legitimacy, investing in communities instead of extracting from them, using my resources to build things that will outlast me, things that help people who are where I once was. Hungry, alone, without hope. Margaret smiles slowly. "That sounds like a foundation. It sounds like a purpose," Daniel corrects. "Something bigger than survival. Something worth the compromises I have made along the way. I think that is wonderful. I want you to be part of it. When the time comes." Advising, shaping, making sure I stay true to the principles you taught me. Will you do that? Margaret feels tears threatening, the good kind, the kind that come from overwhelming love rather than sorrow. "Of course I will, for as long as I am able." Daniel reaches across the counter and squeezes her hand. "Thank you," he says simply, "for everything, for then, for now, for always." "For always," Margaret agrees. The summer heat finally breaks, giving way to cooler autumn breezes that sweep through the streets of Brooklyn. The diner continues to thrive, a small beacon of warmth and welcome in a neighborhood that grows more expensive every year. Margaret knows she could sell the building for a fortune now, retire in comfort, leave the exhausting work of feeding strangers behind. But that was never what the diner was about. It was always about the hungry people who needed someone to feed them, the lonely people who needed someone to listen, the lost people who needed a warm place to rest before continuing their journey. Daniel was one of those people once. Now he is something else. A man of power and influence, yes, a leader of an organization that operates in moral gray areas, but also a man who chooses mercy when destruction would be easier, a man who builds when he could burn, a man who remembers a plate of meatloaf and a kind word and pays that kindness forward in ways that ripple across entire communities. Margaret did not make him what he is, but she gave him the seed, and he grew it into something remarkable. That, she thinks, is the greatest gift she has ever received. The autumn brings unexpected peace. For the first time in years, Daniel speaks of the future with something approaching optimism. His organization is stable, his enemies neutralized or converted, his vision for a more legitimate enterprise gradually taking shape. He talks about the businesses he is acquiring, the communities he is investing in, the foundation he wants to establish when the time is right. Margaret listens to these plans with a warmth that fills her entirely. The hungry boy she fed is becoming something she never imagined, a force for genuine good in a world that tried to destroy him. His path has been dark and difficult, marked by compromises that trouble her conscience, but the direction he is moving brings her hope. Then the letter arrives. It comes to the diner on an ordinary Tuesday morning, delivered by an ordinary mail carrier, addressed to Margaret in handwriting she does not recognize. Inside is a single sheet of paper with a message that makes her blood run cold. You think you saved him. You think he is different because of you. But you do not know the things he has done, the lives he has ended, the families he has destroyed. Ask him about Chicago. Ask him about the warehouse. Ask him about the price of his mercy. Then tell me if you are still proud. There is no signature, no return address. Just those words, burning in Margaret's mind like acid. She does not tell Daniel about the letter, not immediately. Instead, she waits, watching him when he visits, searching for signs of the darkness the anonymous writer described. She has always known that his world is violent. She has accepted that his hands are not clean, but the specificity of the accusations troubles her, suggesting depth she has chosen not to explore. Days pass. The letter sits in her apron pocket, creased from repeated handling. Finally, she cannot bear the weight of it any longer. Daniel arrives on a Thursday evening, relaxed and smiling, carrying takeout from her favorite Italian restaurant. He is talking about a charity event he attended when Margaret interrupts him. "What happened in Chicago?" Daniel freezes. His expression does not change, but something behind his eyes goes very still. "Where did you hear that?" Margaret pulls the letter from her pocket and slides it across the counter. Daniel reads it without touching it, his face growing paler with each line. "Someone is trying to drive a wedge between us," he says finally. "Using my past to poison our relationship. Is what they wrote true?" Daniel looks at her for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is heavy. "Yes." Margaret sits down slowly, her legs suddenly unsteady. "Tell me." Daniel moves to the window, staring out at the street as if the words he needs might be written on the pavement. 5 years ago, before I became what I am now, there was a conflict. A rival group in Chicago was encroaching on our territory, using methods that violated every code we lived by. They targeted families, children, civilians who had nothing to do with our business. When negotiation failed, I was sent to resolve the situation. What did you do? I did what I was ordered to do. I eliminated the threat, completely, permanently, a warehouse where they stored their operations, with everyone inside. Margaret's stomach churns. Everyone. Some of them deserved it. Some of them probably did not. I told myself it was necessary, that their group's methods made them all complicit, that protecting our people required absolute force. But the truth is, I did not question it. I did not hesitate. I simply acted, and people died because I was good at following orders. He turns to face her, and she sees something in his expression she has never seen before. Shame. "That is who I was, Margaret. That is what I did before you started reminding me that I had a choice. The man I am becoming, the man who chooses mercy, did not exist then. There was only the man who survived by being more brutal than his enemies." Margaret sits in silence, absorbing this revelation. The Daniel she knows and the Daniel he has just described seem like two different people, but they are not. They are the same person at different points in a journey she can barely comprehend. "Why did you never tell me?" she asks quietly. "Because I was afraid of exactly this. Afraid of seeing disappointment in your eyes. Afraid of losing the only person who looks at me and sees something worth saving." Margaret closes her eyes, wrestling with the storm of emotions inside her. "You should have told me, I know. The people in that warehouse, they had families?" "Yes. And you just followed orders? Did not question whether there might be another way?" "No. I did not question anything back then. Questioning was weakness. Hesitation got people killed. I was a weapon, Margaret. Point me at a target and I would destroy it. That was my value to the organization. That was my purpose. And now? Now I question everything. Now I look for alternatives before choosing violence. Now I understand that the cost of my previous methods was not just enemy lives, but pieces of my own soul." Margaret opens her eyes and looks at him. Really looks, searching past the expensive clothes and the commanding presence to the man underneath. "You have changed," she says slowly. "I can see that. The person standing in front of me is not the person who walked into that warehouse, but he used to be." Daniel's voice is raw. "The capacity for that violence is still inside me. I have just learned to direct it differently, to use it as a last resort rather than a first response. Does that distinction matter? Does trying to be better now erase what I did then?" Margaret considers this for a long moment. "No," she says finally. "It does not erase it. Nothing can erase it. Those people are still gone, their families still shattered. You carry that weight forever." Daniel flinches as if she has struck him. But, Margaret continues, carry and be crushed are not the same thing. You can carry the weight of your past while still moving forward. You can let your guilt fuel your transformation instead of drowning in it. That is what I see when I look at you now. A man who is trying, desperately trying, to be worthy of the second chance he was never supposed to get. I do not deserve a second chance. That is not for you to decide. Second chances are gifts, Daniel. You do not earn them. You receive them and then spend the rest of your life trying to honor them, even after everything I have done, especially after everything you have done, because the alternative is despair, and despair helps no one. It does not bring back the people in that warehouse. It does not heal the families you hurt. It just adds another casualty to an already unbearable toll. Daniel sinks into a chair, his composure finally cracking. Margaret moves to sit beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. I will not tell you that what you did was acceptable, she says quietly. It was not. It was horrifying, and you will have to live with that horror forever. But I also will not abandon you for having a past you cannot change. You came to me 20 years ago as a hungry child, and I fed you. You came to me again as a powerful man, and I saw the child still inside you. Now you have shown me the darkest chapter of your story, and you know what I see. What? The same hungry child, still looking for someone to believe in him, still hoping that kindness exists, still carrying wounds that never fully healed. Daniel's shoulders shake. He does not make a sound, but Margaret can feel the grief moving through him, years of suppressed guilt finally finding an outlet. She holds him through it, not judging, not absolving, simply present, bearing witness to a confession that needed desperately to be heard. When the storm passes, Daniel lifts his head. His eyes are red, his composure shattered, but there is something different in his expression. Lighter, as if acknowledging the truth has released some of its hold on him. What happens now? He asks hoarsely. Margaret smiles gently. Now you keep trying. You keep building. You keep choosing mercy when destruction would be easier. And you let the weight of Chicago remind you why those choices matter. And us? We are family. I told you that before, and I meant it. Family does not mean pretending someone is perfect. It means loving them completely, including the parts that are broken, including the parts that have hurt others, including the parts that need healing. Even the part that walked into a warehouse? Margaret takes a deep breath. Even that part. Because that part is the reason the rest of you fight so hard to be different. Without that darkness, you would not understand how important it is to choose light. Daniel reaches out and takes her hand, holding it like a lifeline. I do not know what I did to deserve you, he whispers. You knocked on my back door when you were hungry. That was enough. They sit together in the empty diner as the night deepens around them. Neither of them has answers for what comes next. Neither of them can erase the past or guarantee the future. But in this moment, they have each other. A connection that spans decades and transcends the boundaries of conventional morality. Margaret knows she is not condoning the violence Daniel committed. She is not excusing the lives lost in that warehouse or the families devastated by his actions. Those debts cannot be paid, not fully, not ever. But she also knows that condemning Daniel to permanent isolation would serve no purpose. It would not resurrect the dead. It would only add another casualty to a tragedy that already claimed too many. Instead, she chooses something harder, something braver. She chooses to believe in redemption. Not easy redemption, not the kind that erases consequences or pretends the past does not matter. True redemption, the painful incremental process of becoming better than you were, one choice at a time, for the rest of your life. Daniel has chosen that path. He has been walking it since the night she reminded him that anyone can destroy. He has stumbled, fallen, crawled through the darkness of his own making, but he has not stopped. He has not given up. That, Margaret decides, is enough. That is everything. A year passes, and the world continues to turn. The diner remains a fixture. In the Brooklyn neighborhood, its neon sign a beacon of warmth and welcome for anyone who needs it. Margaret's hair is grayer now, her movements a little slower, but her spirit remains undiminished. She still arrives before dawn to prepare the day's specials. She still knows every regular by name. She still treats each customer like family, because to her, that is exactly what they are. Daniel's transformation continues in ways both visible and invisible. His organization has shifted dramatically, divesting from operations that carry moral weight and investing in legitimate enterprises that build rather than extract. The foundation he dreamed of finally launches, funding programs for homeless youth, providing resources for children who find themselves in the same desperate circumstances he once faced. When asked about his motivation, he deflects, preferring to let the work speak for itself. But Margaret knows. Every meal provided, every shelter funded, every scholarship awarded is a small act of atonement. Not enough to balance the scales, never enough for that, but enough to prove that change is possible, that the same hands that once brought destruction can learn to build, that no one is beyond redemption if they commit to the painful, endless work of becoming better. Their relationship has deepened in ways that would be difficult for outsiders to understand. They are not mother and son, though something of that dynamic exists. They are not merely friends, though friendship forms part of their bond. They are something unique, two souls who found each other at a crucial moment and chose to shape each other's lives, a collaboration of kindness and transformation that defies conventional categories. Margaret is proud of him. She tells him this often, knowing how much he needs to hear it. Not proud despite his past, but proud because of how he has confronted it, because of the courage it takes to acknowledge your worst self and work to transcend it. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Daniel arrives at the diner with a gift, a framed photograph of the building, taken from across the street, showing the neon sign glowing through an evening rain. The image captures something essential about the place, its warmth, its persistence, its stubborn refusal to surrender to the forces that sought to destroy it. "I had someone create this from security footage," he explains, "from 20 years ago. The night I first knocked on your door." Margaret looks at the photograph, seeing beyond the physical image to the invisible boy who stood in that alley, starving and desperate and completely alone. "This is beautiful," she says. "It is my most treasured memory, the moment everything changed." Margaret hangs the photograph behind the counter, where she can see it every day, a reminder of where they both came from, a testament to the power of simple kindness. The years continue to pass. Margaret watches Daniel navigate the complex transition of his organization, slowly and carefully moving toward legitimacy. There are setbacks, compromises, moments when the old methods tempt him back toward darkness. But he persists, guided by principles that she helped him articulate, supported by the knowledge that someone believes in his capacity for good. When she falls ill, he is there. It happens suddenly, the way these things do, a cough that will not clear, fatigue that sleep cannot cure, a diagnosis that arrives like a verdict. Margaret receives the news with the same quiet strength that has defined her entire life. She has been cooking and serving and caring for others for 6 decades. Now her body is simply telling her that it is time to rest. Daniel reacts with predictable intensity, flying in specialists, demanding experimental treatments, refusing to accept the unacceptable. Margaret lets him exhaust these options because she knows he needs to feel that he tried everything. But she also knows something he has not yet accepted. Some things cannot be fought. Some endings must simply be faced. She spends her final months at the diner too weak to cook, but not too weak to supervise. Eleanor has taken over the kitchen now, producing the same comfort food that generations of customers have loved. The regulars come more often, sensing the significance of the moment, wanting to show their appreciation while there is still time. Daniel visits daily, sometimes for hours. They talk about everything and nothing, sharing memories, making plans for a foundation that will continue long after Margaret is gone. He holds her hand through the difficult days, reads to her when she is too tired to talk, tells her stories about the changes he is making in her honor. On her last day, Margaret wakes to find him sitting beside her bed, looking older than his years and more vulnerable than she has ever seen him. "I am not ready," he says quietly. I know. How am I supposed to do this without you? Margaret smiles, reaching out to touch his face. The same way you did everything else. One choice at a time, one act of mercy at a time, one plate of food for someone who needs it at a time. You saved my life. You saved your own life. I just gave you something to eat while you figured out how. Daniel shakes his head. It was more than food. It was belief. You believed in me when no one else did, when I did not even believe in myself. Then pay that forward. Find the next hungry child who needs someone to believe in them. Feed them. Listen to them. Show them that kindness exists. I will. I promise, I know you will. That is why I am not worried. Margaret closes her eyes, suddenly tired in a way that goes beyond physical exhaustion. One more thing, she whispers. Anything. The diner. Keep it open. Not for profit, not for business. Keep it as a place where anyone who needs a meal can find one. Make it what it was always meant to be. Daniel's voice is thick when he responds. I will make sure it stays open forever. I promise you, Margaret. On everything I am, I promise. Good. Then I can rest. She drifts away gently, surrounded by the scent of coffee and baking bread, the sounds of a diner that has nourished 3 generations of hungry people. Daniel stays with her until the end, holding her hand as she slips from this world into whatever comes next. The funeral is a small affair, attended by regulars from the diner and staff from Daniel's organization, who never fully understood his connection to an ordinary woman in Brooklyn. Eleanor gives a eulogy that makes everyone cry, describing a boss who was also a mentor, a teacher, a second mother. Daniel speaks last. He tells the story of a hungry boy who knocked on a door and found kindness. He tells of transformation and redemption, of lessons learned and principles forged in the unlikely crucible of a meatloaf dinner. He tells them that Margaret Sullivan was the most important person in his life, and that everything he has become, everything he hopes to be, exists because she believed in him first. He does not reveal the details of his organization. He does not speak of violence or power or the moral compromises of his past. He simply tells the truth, that love can transcend circumstances, that kindness can change trajectories, that the simplest acts are often the most profound. After the service, Daniel returns to the diner alone. He sits at the counter where he sat as a child, ordering the meatloaf that Margaret made famous. Eleanor prepares it, exactly as her mentor taught her, and when Daniel takes the first bite, tears stream down his face. He can taste Margaret's love in every molecule, her dedication, her faith, her stubborn insistence that everyone deserves a chance, even hungry boys who appear from nowhere, and powerful men who carry the weight of terrible deeds. He finishes the meal slowly, savoring every bite, imprinting the memory permanently in his mind. Then he gets to work. The Margaret Sullivan Foundation launches 6 months later, funded by a portion of Daniel's legitimate holdings. It provides meals, housing, education, and mentorship for homeless and at-risk youth across the eastern seaboard. The flagship program is called Second Chances, offering support for young people who have made mistakes and are looking for a new direction. The diner becomes a landmark, preserved and protected, renamed Sullivan's in Margaret's honor. It continues to serve the community as it always has, but now any meal is free for anyone who cannot afford to pay. A sign near the door reads, "In memory of Margaret Sullivan, who believed that feeding the hungry is the most important work in the world." Daniel continues his transformation, accelerating the shift toward legitimate operations until his organization is nearly unrecognizable from what it once was. There are still shadows at the edges, compromises he cannot fully escape, but the direction of his life is unmistakable. He is building now, creating, protecting the vulnerable instead of preying on them. When people ask why he changed, he tells them about a woman who fed him when he was starving, about simple kindness that rippled across decades, about the revolutionary power of being seen by someone who believed you could be more than your circumstances. He tells them about Margaret, and in telling her story, he keeps her alive. If you have watched this far, it is because this story touched something inside you. The connection between Margaret and Daniel, The power of kindness, the possibility of redemption, these are not just story elements, they are truths that apply to all of our lives. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. Every story we share is designed to remind you that compassion matters, that transformation is possible, that the meals we share and the kindness we extend can ripple across years in ways we cannot imagine. Subscribe now so you do not miss a single story. If you watched this entire video, leave a comment saying, "I watched this far." Let me know you are part of this community, that you believe in the power of simple kindness, that you are willing to stand with stories that celebrate the best of human nature. If this story moved you, hit the like button. Your likes tell the algorithm that these stories matter, helping them reach other viewers who need to hear them. And finally, if you know someone who needs to be reminded that kindness can change everything, share this video with them. You never know when a shared story might be exactly what someone needs to hear. Margaret fed a hungry boy 20 years ago. She did not know who he would become. She did not expect anything in return. She simply saw someone in need and offered what she had. That boy became a man who changed an empire, not through violence or fear, but through the mercy he learned from a diner owner in Brooklyn. The most powerful force in the world is not money or weapons or influence. It is kindness. Simple, stubborn, unreasonable kindness. Go find someone who needs it, feed them, believe in them, and watch what happens.